Bonjour, wasabiko Nindijnikas, Nishnabe Kweyendao, Kiwet Nindunjiba, Kingston. Hi, my name is Monica and I'm an Anishinaabe woman from Treaty 9 Territory in Northern Ontario. I currently reside in Kingston, where I attend Queen's University as a PhD candidate in the biology department. I'm also an educational development associate with the Center for Teaching and Learning. The information in this 4-part web series is a brief introduction to my interpretation of peer-reviewed scholarly articles, my lived experience, and conversations that I have observed and participated in over the years. The context of these conversations include around the kitchen table, sharing circles and ceremonies, administrative committee meetings, activist gatherings, and academic discussions. Contributors to these conversations include elders, youth, and otherwise knowledgeable members from Indigenous communities, not only from all over Canada, but internationally. Contributors also include non-Indigenous individuals ranging from allied to non-allied settlers, to international friends who, although familiar with oppression in their own homelands, are only just learning of Canada's colonial context. These personal interpretations that I will be presenting have been reviewed and guided by mentor Lindsay Brant, a Mohawk woman from Kenhtè, Tyendinaga Mohawk Territory, Ontario, an educational developer with the Center for Teaching and Learning, and an adjunct professor with the Smith School of Business. It's worth reiterating that this web series represents my interpretation of the above-mentioned information gathered over the years, and as such, any potential errors in interpretation are mine alone. That being said, let's talk about land acknowledgements. Land acknowledgements. This topic is complex, so let's ease in with some basic definitions. What is a land acknowledgement and what is its purpose? Simply put, I would define a land acknowledgement or territorial acknowledgement as statements of varying lengths and formats that admit the past and present existence and relationship of Indigenous peoples on and with the land where the acknowledgement is taking place. Many land acknowledgements also include some admittance of the colonial violence which robbed Indigenous peoples of the land. Land acknowledgements also include the naming of the particular Indigenous groups from the land. However, there is some controversy to this aspect, which I'll discuss shortly. Land acknowledgements are provided by non-Indigenous settlers and visitors, or by Indigenous visitors, and are aimed at non-Indigenous settlers and visitors. This is distinct from a welcome to territory or Indigenous protocols, which are provided by Indigenous individuals or community from the land on which the welcome is occurring, and aimed at visiting Indigenous and non-Indigenous settlers and visitors. The general purpose of a land acknowledgement is to educate non-Indigenous settlers and visitors and to challenge the erasure of Indigenous past, present, and futures. In Canada, land acknowledgements, particularly those which addressed colonial theft of land, work towards some of the many calls to action by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the TRC, and the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. TRC call number 45.1 states, repudiate concepts used to justify European sovereignty over Indigenous lands and peoples, such as the doctrine of discovery and terra nullius. This statement also appears in calls number 47, 46.2, and 49 under various contexts ranging from law and policy reform to religious denominations. TRC call number 46.3 states, renew or establish treaty relationships based on principles of mutual recognition, mutual respect, and shared responsibility for maintaining those relationships into the future. The National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls call to action number 15.2 states, decolonize by learning the true history of Canada and Indigenous history in your local area, learn about and celebrate Indigenous peoples' history, cultures, pride, and diversity, acknowledging the land you live on and its importance to local Indigenous communities both historically and today. Now that we know what a land acknowledgement is and what its purpose is, let's wade in deeper and explore a couple of the complexities and controversies. Controversy number 1, the checkbox land acknowledgement. Due to the hierarchical nature of dominant society, institutions tend to seek out standardization and uniformity, which inevitably leads to scripted land acknowledgement statements. In turn, these scripted statements become repetitive public performances in which individuals and institutions become complacent with ongoing colonialism. Essentially, by way of the performed statement, non-Indigenous settlers and visitors provide themselves with permission to be on the land. In their podcast, Tribal Research Specialists, the podcast, episode number 28, hosts Aaron Brian Upsaloga and Shandin Pete Salish Dine liken this performative act to sheepishly providing Indigenous peoples with a receipt for the stolen land. So how do we address the checkbox land acknowledgement? If we return to the purpose of a land acknowledgement as being an educational tool or a pedagogical intervention of sorts, we can conclude that just as there's no one-size-fits-all education, there is no one-size-fits-all land acknowledgement. Just as a mathematics lesson must be tailored to the audience, be it a group of 7th graders, doctoral candidates, or individuals learning woodworking, land acknowledgements must take into account the audience, their knowledge level, and the relevance of the knowledge being shared. Land acknowledgements are highly contextual and also take into account many other variables such as the speaker's knowledge level, the positionality of both the audience and the speaker, the level of engagement and comfort level of the Indigenous communities being named, and the current political and social landscape, both locally and federally, just to name a few. This highly contextualized nature necessitates protocols for individuals to craft context-specific land acknowledgements, unique to the situations in which they are delivering the acknowledgement, rather than a policy which offers individuals with a scripted performative statement. In her 2016 online article, Beyond Territorial Acknowledgements, Métis writer and educator Chelsea Vowell highlights another meaningful way to address the performative nature of the scripted statement. Land acknowledgements often identify Indigenous peoples as guests or uninvited guests, which imposes the role of host onto Indigenous peoples. Vowell asks, to what extent was permission actually sought to be on these territories and conduct the affairs that Indigenous nations are thanked for hosting? What if an Indigenous person stood up and revoked that assumed permission? For this reason, I personally prefer the term visitor until an individual or institution has done the work of connecting with the host community to learn and enact the proper protocols. What are the responsibilities and expectations of guests on the land? And are those guest obligations being fulfilled? Controversy number 2, which communities are being named? Another controversial point in land acknowledgements is which communities are being named. Prior to European colonization, many Indigenous communities roamed or migrated to different regions on the land for various reasons. During European colonization and throughout Canada's history, countless Indigenous communities were forcefully relocated. This process continues today, as many Indigenous people leave the federally recognized communities and territories for other regions. When acknowledging the Indigenous communities of the land, who decides which communities are to be acknowledged, and on what grounds are those decisions made? So how do we address it? Much like the checkbox controversy we just discussed, there is no clear, simple answer. If we return once again to the purpose of a land acknowledgement as educational tools and refer to the TRC calls to action on refuting the doctrine of discovery and terra nullius claims on the land, we can focus on the process of learning about the land and its past and present inhabitants, then sharing that knowledge through the land acknowledgement. I mentioned earlier that land acknowledgements are contextual, and so the more you learn about the land and the more meaningful your relationships with Indigenous communities grow, so will your understanding of the communities which have been in relation with the land over time. Some starting points you may consider include researching the Indigenous communities named in your institution's official land acknowledgement statement and taking a look at some credible online resources of known land use, for example, nativeland.ca or whos.land. Additionally, you can reach out to your local Friendship Center or your institution's Indigenous office. Here at Queen's, that would be the Office of Indigenous Initiatives or the Four Directions Indigenous Student Center. Although there is still much to discuss about land acknowledgements, I'll end this video with the 4 levels of land acknowledgement engagement described by Stewart-Ambo and Yang 2021 and provide some possible action items for each. No land acknowledgement yet. If you're a part of an institution, department, research group, or an individual without a land acknowledgement policy, practice, or protocol, then your action item is to begin those conversations and reflections. Your aim could be to create a land acknowledgement. For acknowledgement, get in relation. If your land acknowledgement has not been written in consultation with Indigenous communities from the land, then your action item is to begin these relationships with the relevant Indigenous communities. As mentioned above, many institutions have organizations that can help you on this lifelong journey. With acknowledgement, learn your responsibilities. If your land acknowledgement has been written in consultation with the relevant Indigenous communities, but you are not aware of your obligations as a guest on the land, then your action item is to become a welcomed guest. Learn the proper protocols and your responsibilities, then materialize your acknowledgement into actions and personal commitments. Beyond acknowledgement, build institutional accountability. If you're maintaining your land acknowledgement through the proper protocols, are a welcomed guest on the land, and are fulfilling your obligations, then your action item is to ensure institutional accountability. Is your research group, department, institution, or government honoring the treaties and agreements that have been put in place? Are they doing the hard work of decolonizing and indigenizing? To quote Stewart-Ambo and Yang 2021, those with greater institutional power have greater obligations. And I would add that we as individuals must hold them accountable to those great obligations. Once again, we find ourselves in deep waters as I end this video. As you wade through the waters and swim back to shore to continue on with your day, I would like to leave you with a final thought and question. In the article, Rethinking the Practice and Performance of Indigenous Land Acknowledgement, Armin Garnet Rufo Ojibwe expresses a meaningful realization. History tells us that wherever the land was valuable for either settlement or economic reasons, Indigenous people were forced into treaty and moved. It also occurred to me that the residents of Muskoka know this, and either live with the guilt or have buried it deep enough that for them, history is no longer relevant as our Indigenous peoples. This situation epitomizes the reality of Canada, a country founded on greed and subsequently guilt or forgetting, and it is a legacy that Canadians have to either deal with or pass on to their children. My question to you is this: given your current position, whatever that may be, what will you do to address this colonial legacy and ongoing reality? Will you acknowledge it and do the hard work needed to be in good relations, to be a good guest? Or will you forget and pass that guilt on to the next generation? Miigwech Bizendaw Yeg. Thank you so much for listening. I'll see you next time. Giga Wabaman.